So here we are. We are live here. Vince, I gotta ask you this. You can tell me this is true or false. To really learn about wine, you have to travel. True or false?
I would say true because I mean I based my whole career off that, right? So my big thing is so much of wine is the people, place, and food around it. We if you love wine, you learn that it's about the place and you can travel vicariously through it. But there's nothing like actually going to the physical location. That's so huge for me. My entire show is kind of based on that. Now, if you can't travel to the place, that's why I made the show, right? And it's also the really cool thing about wine is you can travel vicariously, especially if you're into food. Then you can make the proper food pairings, or you can go out to a restaurant and get those, and you can kind of be transported.
So what is it? Because I'm along those same lines. I agree with that 100%. I've been to most of the great regions of the world, and information just sinks in differently. You put more principles together. But let's expand on that. Why do you think that travel enriches wine, enriches people, enriches everything?
Yeah, so it's funny as I get older, I do find I'm only like 35, but I find that my memory isn't as good as I used to be. Like I can't recall celebrity names that I used to know, right? So to me, the older I get, the more I almost need that connection to all the senses. It's the same reason why when you taste wine at your house, it never tastes as good as the vineyard. It's that same principle. Not okay, the vineyard probably was serving it at the proper temperature and but you more importantly have this core memory of who you were with. There was the smell of the place you were in, there was the visual. And so what happens is when you put all those things together, your brain makes these connections and it just ingrains more. I have to imagine there's some science behind it. This is just me kind of spitballing, but there has to be science behind it.
100%. I think like, I judge a lot of competitions, and when weird grapes come up and people ask me about them, I'm spinning them back and forth. And one time, one of the panel chairs was like, "Well, it's because you've been there. That rewires your brain in a way, and it solidifies those connections." I love what you're doing in terms of Vias for Vino, just making it happen. What's the for those of you who don't know? I'm sure most people that are watching this will know who you are. Putting together these really elaborate, beautiful, almost many like documentaries of the great and lesser known wine regions of the world. What's really the mission behind that? What got you started? I know you started out as a wine club and it eventually became this.
Yeah, so that's a couple questions. So I'll start it how it started, and then I'll tell you the mission behind it, kind of integrated. I started the show, like you said, as a wine club. The goal has always been wine education. What happened was I was taking my certified sommelier exam. I used to try and be a rock star in LA. I was trying to be a musician, singer, songwriter. It
Okay.
was a lot of fun. I got to play at all the cool venues on the Sunset Strip, and it was great. But I realized you have to be good. Uh, you can't be good. You have to be great, if not excellent, as a musician, and that's really only a prerequisite. Then you also have to have a lot of luck, and you have to have the right kind of circumstances come together. And I realized that I was good, but I wasn't great. And I think musicians have this thing where they don't see any other option for themselves. They're like, I'm either going to be a musician or I'm going to be homeless. And I had this passion for other things. I just knew I wasn't going to get there. So I transitioned into food and beverage. I was always working in food and beverage to pay the bills, both through college, then as I was supporting a music career, got into the wine stuff, got into my certified sommelier exam. The only way I was able to afford the education was because I was working in a nice hotel and they sponsored it. At that
Mm.
point in my career, I couldn't afford to pay the $1,000 it would take for WSET classes or Court of Master classes. And so they sponsored it, which was great. But I didn't like that there was that. That was number one. If you didn't have those means, if you didn't have a sponsor and you're young and you're in the industry, how do you learn? Number two, I didn't like that there was nobody teaching wine the way I would want to learn wine, which was kind of the show we eventually created. The video, travel, food component, all the things that make it fun, number one, but also like with visual aids. I know you had Madeline on here, Wine Folly. That really helped me. I wanted to make like a video version of that where she has these
Mm.
infographics and maps. I wanted to do that for video. And at the time, I actually still kind of think nobody's really doing the combination of things we're doing in the show, which is those interactive maps, the education, the grape breakdowns, but also the tastings and the interviews and the food and things like that. And so I had this idea initially. I was like, okay, I'm going to educate people affordably. I'm going to put together a little wine. It was going to have mini bottles in it, and then you'd get it shipped to your house. And then I would also have some videos that accompanied the wines, and you would get a wine education. Once I got into that, I actually got my liquor license. It's funny. I heard Madeline talking about how she had the liquor license application in the window, which you have to post publicly.
Yeah.
I had the same thing in my apartment in Los Angeles. I had it in the window, and people were calling and complaining to the city because they thought a bar was opening up in my apartment. It was wild. I got the liquor license. I attempted to sell wine, but what you'll learn quickly is, if you're trying to sell wine in America, is that it's very, very, very regulated. And the 3-tier system basically prevents small participants like me from even having a shot. I could go talk for an hour just about the 3-tier system and the kind of unconstitutional nature of it. But it basically led me to, okay, I'm not going to be a wine shipper. I'm not going to be able to sell wine. And at the same time, we had recorded the first 3 videos, and they really got a lot of traction. They got good feedback. They didn't like blow up on YouTube. I wasn't even using YouTube for it at the time. I was using Amazon, because you could self-distribute on Amazon, and we were getting good feedback, and I knew it was good. I always look back when the music career was happening. I just like couldn't get people to come to the shows. Nobody's really that passionate about it. Like, people are like, oh, it was almost like, oh, that's cute. You know,
I know exactly. Yes.
But when I did this, I felt it right away. We didn't see success or money at the start, but I felt right away that I had something special with the videos. People wanted it. It was a product that was kind of missing in the market. And so after I got through the first season, I kind of abandoned the wine sales component, and I leaned into the documentary show style, and we figured out our way from there. So the core mission is accessible wine education. That's a long way of saying that. The secondary mission is what you hit at the beginning, your first question, which is, if I can get people to travel to places that they haven't been before, I just think travel is the greatest form of education you could possibly have.
It's by far.
And yeah, and I know you've traveled a lot too, and you probably felt similarly.
I think travel is the ultimate way to break down preconceptions, prejudices, to get over judgment, and just to expand your horizons. We love wine, so there's sharing a meal with somebody is one of the most intimate things we can do. But also, what you're doing is walk through a market when you go to a new country. That'll teach you a ton about the culture, the local culture.
Grocery stores too. I always hit up a
yes.
convenience store, grocery store. Like, that's fun. Markets are fun, but grocery stores are also like super interesting.
Oh, especially when I'm in Spain, Italy, and Portugal, France too. Oh, I love going to the supermarkets there. So I'm going to ask you this. I started out, obviously, my wine career started in Europe. That's where most of the networking and everything happened. You started working on the floor here in America, plus you were bartending and stuff. Did you feel like there was a lot of gatekeeping, or there was a big obstacle because you were a young person trying to learn and then eventually educate people about wine?
Not the young person thing, but I still feel like there's a lot of gatekeeping with the industry. I'm still not part of the Cool Kids Club. I heard you had posted a video about those awards the other day. And
Congratulations, by the way. I'm a little envious, but congratulations.
No, thank you. But what's funny is, as you were saying it, even though I don't have a place to talk on this particular one because I did get nominated, I felt so many similar feelings throughout I started this in 2016, first episode's 2018. So I don't know, 7-8 years, whatever it is. I felt so many similar feelings. Like, because I wasn't part of the Cool Kids Club, or I wasn't like currently working in a restaurant, a Michelin rated restaurant or something like that, they just didn't let me in. They didn't want to work with me. I just kind of vowed at that point. I remember there was a person who I wanted to collaborate with in LA, and they won't be named, but you would know them if I said them potentially. And I remember I sat down with them, and I was offering to do all the work. I was like, I just like the collab, something like this, right? And they just basically came back to me, and they were like, well, I don't even know who you are. Like, who are you? Like, it was this like, you're not even in part of my circles, so why would I consider working with you? And it drove me for so many years to be like, you know what? Like I'm going to be the opposite of that when I get some form of success. Anybody who asks to be me to come on the show or for me to talk to them or give them career advice or whatever it is, I'm always 100% yes, I'll do it. I'll do it for free. I don't care. And then I kind of use it as motivation to like, all right, well, you're going to eventually know who I am. Like I want to, Gary V has this great quote. He's like, I want to have the biggest building because I built the biggest building, not because I tore any down. And that's just kind of what I try to internalize, you know?
Is it the one of the original big wine YouTube channels? That's what I'm guessing it is.
Yeah. Yeah. He's,
The cast of characters. You know, it's so funny. I relate so much to what you're doing. Obviously, that's exactly how I feel. And it's so funny. I'll tell you, we never even talked before doing the show because I wanted everything to be original. So I'll share this with you. It's so funny when I was because I've been doing YouTube consistently since December 2015, never missing a week. Granted, the first 6 years I didn't know what I was doing. It was just an iPhone, really crappy videos. But a few years ago, when you started to pop up, when I came back to the US, and you started popping up, I talked to actually this guy that he's kind of a part-time wine writer, but he's won an Emmy because he's produced shows in LA before, and he likes your show. And I was talking about back and forth, and I said, nobody in wine really has got it figured out completely, like on a huge scale. Like some of our, like you're getting up there and subscribers, your channel, Constantine's pretty big, but it's still small channels in the realm of real YouTube. But I always thought if somebody got it right on video, they could become really powerful. And I was talking with this Emmy producer, and he's talking about your show, and I said, it's completely different. It's got whole crew running around, maybe a couple A7 S3s. I don't know what the gear is. You know, I'm
you nailed it. That's the
A7S,
rig.
yeah. So, and then it's just me doing by myself. You know, I don't know which way works. And he was like, well, maybe both do. And I was
Yeah,
like,
and that's I mean, what a
I got
fair
over my own ego. I think it was just it's most envy. It's because I know a lot of other YouTubers, even when I wasn't so popular, were copying my video themes. Like I see it still happens today, but that was just coming from a place of envy. And I was like, you're right. You're 100% right. There's a place for that. And I remember seeing a couple of your shows because I travel still every month in airports. And I thought, man, doing great work.
No, I appreciate it. I have a couple things to say on that just because you hit some
Yeah,
points that are
please.
important to me. Yeah. So, and I don't want that comment I previously made about how like I use it as fuel. Like it was something where I was angry. I mean, I maybe was a little, but it's more about I'm at my worst when I'm envious of what other people are doing. When I spend, like I think most of us, right? When you spend too much time on social comparing yourself to others, that and perfection is the enemy of progress. And when you compare yourself to others, all you'll want to do is be perfect because you're looking at where they are. There's enough room for all of us to eat, as they say. Like there is enough food at the table. There's enough audience in 2024 that everybody has a path to success, and finding yours shouldn't, you can take influences, but it needs to be your own thing. It needs to be what you're passionate about. It needs to be what you're good at. And it needs to be, obviously there needs to be customer demand. And sometimes lining those up is a process. It takes years. I'm sure know exactly that. I can't believe you just told me you've been doing a video a week for how many years? I mean, the only life hack in this world is consistency plus time. There's no shortcut. That's it. Consistency plus time. I was doing this show before anybody really cared for a lot of years. I was working as a bartender and sometimes as a som on the floor for the first 3 seasons of the show. And people would come into the bar and they'd be like, oh, like they'd know the show and they'd be surprised that I'm still like hustling. But we were all self-funded, all self-produced, and I didn't want to give that up. So I worked, as many hours as I could for as long as I could.
And I can hear, and it's so funny because a lot of things that you say just hit me so hard in the wine industry. Because I started out as in the wine writing space, especially with Europeans, and obviously, I got a lot of flack, and I thought the same way. I was like, well, you're going to know who I am because I'm just going to make this happen. But I got out of the mindset where I was like, you know what? I'm going to dedicate myself specifically to YouTube. I'm a YouTuber, not a wine writer anymore, because there was a lot of lack of collaboration in that space. Now I think like like I'm the only one that's collaborated with. I've asked a lot of people to be on the show because you're right, there is room. More and more people are getting, obviously video is, the most traffic from the internet comes from video streamed or downloaded, and there's room for everybody to eat.
Yeah, and by the way, that person at the early career, if they wanted to collaborate tomorrow, I would do it in a heartbeat. Like there's just no space in this life to like keep that stuff and let it kind of eat you up. Like let's just all keep growing forward. There's not much. I find that I'm at my best I'm not saying I can do this all the time, by the way. I'm a human, but I find that I'm at my best when I'm the most focusing on gratitude and giving back and just putting out good in the world. And I found myself in ruts where I don't do that for extended periods of time, whether it be social media can be really bad. I'll get in like these holes where I'm looking at it every day and it'll really corrupt. Or if I'm having failures in the business, I'm pitching shows and I'm not getting anywhere, things like that. So I always try and go back to that core of like gratitude is my number one thing. There's so many people in this world who have to do careers and jobs that they hate every day, day in and day out. And if you can build something where you don't have to do that, you just have to be grateful.
Oh, I wake up every day and thinking about, like, of course, I think in my space, okay, more money could be coming in, it could be more popular, but every day, like, we wake up and we give to ourselves because we're producing something that's for us. So I can relate to that 100%. And I agree. Gratitude is the gateway of the heart. I agree. Let's go to my next question. This is a place that you've been. I wanted to spark some conversation. I follow you on social media, so obviously, you were just in the Loire, so a Domaine Amoy
Yeah.
Sauvignier, one of the basically benchmarks. You were just in the Loire. Tell me over recent episodes, recent travels.
Absolutely.
What
So
is it? But no, this is the question. What is it that gets you? Like what stories have really hit you hard and really sunk in to let you experience a place?
okay, yeah, I love that you did your homework. Not only that you knew I went to Loire, but you read that Chenin was my grape. I don't know if you read, if that's why you got
I love Chanel, as they say in France. I love Chanel.
By the way, another one of those, just a side note, one of the things I get the most criticism for all the time is the lack of pronunciation on French words because I don't do it in the French accent.
French is so tough.
Yeah, and so I don't even do it because I just know that most Americans are going to say it in the American, I don't say champagne, I say champagne. But I have a ton of criticism I get for that. That's like one of the places because people will comment, like it'll be an hour-long video of we put into it, we give all this knowledge, and the only comment they write will be like, it's pronounced this way, not this way. I'm like, you watched the whole hour and that's what you took away?
People want to, no, it is fun. Getting over those comments. I got over it. I actually had a troll for a long time. She was a sommelier, so she knew her stuff, and she was every single video. And I finally said, I go from Hungary to Portugal to Croatia to to Mexico to Italy. Like, I'm not going to get all those pronunciations right. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best. I'm not going to get them all right, especially the French. The French is real difficult.
Yeah, it's just a funny thing. And like you said, you just kind of have to let it go. It is weird that your brain gets hardwired to remember that stuff. That is what drives me crazy because 99% is positive.
It's
And
awesome.
by the way, I don't present myself as I've never presented myself as the greatest Som. I will be I guarantee you have more theoretical knowledge than me, and so do most of the other creators. I found my job and my passion because I'm passionate for telling stories. I'm passionate about wine. I'm passionate about travel and the food and the entire thing. So it doesn't bother me that people know more than me. And I think they think that's like a dig at me. Like
that's a good place. That's a good.
Doesn't matter.
Because everybody in wine wants to know more than everybody else to just that validates their self-worth. And don't hate on them because I was there before when I started in the industry, so I don't hate. But what are some of those memorable experiences that have really sunk in and really got you?
Yeah, so let's talk Chenin first. I did deviate. I apologize. I deviated from the question. But let's talk Chenin
that's okay.
First. Yeah. And then we can go on to some other ones. So the reason I love Chenin Blanc is because It was the first wine. I had a buddy who worked at a restaurant in Santa Monica called Melise. It's a Michelin rated restaurant by Josiah Citrin. It was my first Michelin experience. I really couldn't afford it, but my buddy, when you're in the industry, he helped make it happen a little bit.
Yeah.
And he brought out some special wines, and he did, it was classic Michelin, like 16 courses. And he did, in this pairing, he did Chenin 4 ways. He did the dry Sauvignon style. He did the off dry style, aged. He did the sparkling style at some point, and he did the sweet. And it was the first time I was like, wow, look at all this that one grape from one place can do. Look at this versatility. There was also this, Chenin has this savory, funky, lanolin, wool. I sometimes, there's like a flinty character at times. Sometimes almost, winemakers don't like when I say it, but can be like a plastic pool toy character that I think is so fun. It's kind of like petrol and Riesling, right? It's just a combination of flint and petrol. Anyway, it's a savory red wine lover's white wine. And I just fell in love with it. And it blew my mind. I was a musician. I told you I was a guitarist. And I remember the first time I heard John Mayer play Neon acoustic live.
Great. Tough song to play too.
Right. And I had a similar experience. I was like, I didn't know guitar could do this. And it was the same thing when I had Chenin in that restaurant. I was like, I didn't know wine could do this. And so it was kind of my it wine. And then as I got more into wine, the other thing about the Loire is that you can start there as a young wino and drink really well for a decent price. I can't say that about a lot of regions in France, but Loire, like, I don't have to spend more than $30, $40 to drink some of the top wines in the region. And so it was a special area in my heart because it helped me through my intro wine journey. And so going there, I had never been there, but going there finally just 2 weeks ago, we went for our Loire episode, was a special experience because of that. There's some interesting things. Obviously, you've got the chateaus. It's like this yin and yang, which I think is cool. So you have all these chateaus, all these beautiful castles, and then you find out that the way they built them was excavating the rock near the river in these caves. And so there was limestone caves. They used the limestone to build the chateaus. And then what you were left with was these caves that are now used for wine cellaring and wine fermentation and wine aging because they are a perfect 55 degrees all year round. It was 90 outside. You walked 10 feet into this cave. It wasn't even really underground. It's just like in the cave, and it's a perfect 55. It was a really cool thing. We'll talk about it in the episode. So there's some fun things in Loire that are just really unique.
I saw that you were tasting with them because I go to Loire every other year. I saw you were at Hewitt. I went down to those caves, tasted some old 93s. You were with
that's one of my favorites. I didn't go there. I went to Champollion.
Yeah, Champollion was Champollion. All Kermit Lynch brings them in. Fantastic wines.
Yep.
Great stuff. What about, you were telling me a story about Lebanon that really touched you?
Yes.
I love Lebanese cuisine and the wines.
Yeah. So I am half Lebanese.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So my great grandparents emigrated from Lebanon to the US. And so this episode was I'd wanted to do a Lebanon episode since the beginning of the show. I was like, man, if I could do that one day, like, wouldn't that be incredible? Mm-hmm. Finally, end of season 5, 20 episodes in, we got the opportunity to do it. I brought my brother along, never been out of the country. So if you watch the episode, he's in it a little bit. And I talk about at the end of the episode how I had gotten in one of those ruts where, like, the job was a job and I wasn't appreciating what I had.
Of course.
And then I took my brother along to Lebanon for this episode. And I don't know if you remember your first time abroad. For me, it was in college. We didn't travel as kids, but in college, I got to go. And it just, like, it completely blows your mind, right? And I got to watch him go through that in real time. And it reminded me why I love what I do and I love travel, and why and I was grateful for the opportunity to take him. I mean, that another, going back to gratitude, that I would have the ability to take him. And we also not only did the wines, which are incredible, and the food and the cuisine and the culture, but we had distant family there and we got to meet them. And that I don't want to spoil too much of the episode, but if you watch the episode, you'll see it. And it was just really, really special. And so going back to like travel is just the greatest teacher. It was one of those episodes that felt that way.
And food, like the Lebanese cuisine, is so good.
It's so good.
I have a good idea for this next segment here. Since you're so passionate about storytelling, pick out one of the wines that you're tasting and tell me a story. Tell me the real story behind it, not what it tastes like. Tell me why what it means to you. Ray Murrow in the chat said that was a great episode. Your Lebanese episode was a great episode.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, it was. It's the season. It's the culmination of the work thus far. I hope to exceed it as we go forward, but I was just really proud of it. It just had a good emotional heart. So tell them thank you for that. All right, so I have an Assyrtiko from Greece that is actually our VIP wine of the month, part of how we continue to operate. Similar to you, we have people who help support us. There are Vino VIPs, and I do a wine of the month. It's usually a region that I haven't been able to get to on the show, so it's like a way for me to talk about fun wines that I haven't actually been able to go film an episode yet. And so I did Assyrtiko because I actually am going on a little vacation to Greece in a couple weeks, which I can't wait for. But I discovered this wine on my first vacation to Greece, which was my honeymoon. And so obviously a special time, very magical. Up until we went to Japan last year, Greece was my favorite place I'd ever been. Mm-hmm. I think Japan gets a little bit of the edge, though. I'm not hating on Greece. It's just Japan.
Japan is special, man. When you're there for, go ahead.
Yeah, we could talk about Japan because I found it fascinating. I actually find a lot of similarities between French and Japanese culture.
Me too. But especially in the kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so I discovered this wine. You go to Santorini, you see the way they train the vines on the ground, which is completely unique. They train them in these little baskets. They're like weaved on the ground because it's super windy on the island. And if they have the vines like normal, the grapes will get damaged. And so they train the vines to be in these little baskets on the ground so they don't get damaged. I found that super unique. And then we're driving all over the island and you see they're doing pasito style, which is they're drying out all these grapes on mats everywhere you go. And turns out those are also Assyrtiko grapes.
Good old Vinsanto.
They make a Vinsanto, a sweet style wine with it. And so it has this memory of like, I was on my honeymoon. I was learning all these new things. And then also, this was kind of before my honeymoon would have been 2018, 2019. These wines have gotten pretty geeky because of their ability to age. They're one of those like high acid, but still medium bodied wines that can stand up to a lot of things. They're more savory and mineral driven than they are aromatic or fruity. And so they've got this reputation now. So I kind of got in on the like ground floor before it was cool. Now they've gone up in price a little bit.
Oh, just that you're not getting inexpensive Assyrtiko. You're spending $35-$40 in the US.
Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore. It used to, but not anymore.
So that's actually a fantastic story. Are you going to do a Greek episode,
I hope so. That's one that's on the list. Because listen, you don't have to tell me twice. Like I'll go there anytime. It's a wonderful country. It reminded me of the reasons I like Portugal, which is a really just great food, great history, but really friendly people. I find that that's the thing when I go to a region that really takes it from good to great is helpful or friendly people that can just help enhance your experience. And that's an intangible that you can't put a number on how many, nice people there are. Like you can't how many wineries or how old their history is with wine. But if there's great people behind a region, you feel that when you're there. And there's a few places in the world I felt that.
I have a question. Have you ever got comments or anybody contacting you? We're in the business. We're doing this like full time. I think a lot, especially when you're shooting, you want to make everything look nice. You're going to get the red carpet's going to get rolled out. The same thing when I'm on writer's trips or I'm doing my own content going in, you're going to get a fantastic experience. Did anybody ever complain back to I went to that same place, but I didn't have the same feeling, the same experience? Is that anything that ever in your head, you're something that you're cognizant of or not really?
I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm getting a different special experience when I'm filming. First off, I am very cognizant of that. I'm like, it's one of the coolest parts of the job is how many people get to go to the place they're going and they get to taste with the winemaker, right? Yeah. Very, very special. I actually, funny enough, I mean, just answering honestly, the people who have recreated our trips, I haven't had anybody come, maybe it's happened, but I haven't had anybody come back and tell me what you said. We try and pick and work with producers who are grateful for the opportunity, who are good advocates for the region. And usually if you have somebody who's an advocate for the region, they're going out of their way to make sure people kind of have a good time.
Yeah.
So I haven't really had that many experiences. I mean, it doesn't help that, or it doesn't hurt rather, that wine country is almost always in pretty great locations.
Yeah.
So you're already in vacation rose-colored glasses anyway, so you're kind of seeing everything a little nicer. But I'm surprised how many people have gone to places that I wouldn't have expected. Like I did the Chile episode, and I've had a lot of people go recreate our trip to. I was like, I don't know how many people are going to go to Chile or Mexico. People have gone, like they've recreated our trip to places. I assume they're going to go to France and they're going to go to Italy and they're going to go to Spain. But when they go to those places, I've even had a couple people since the Lebanon episode start planning their trip to Lebanon, God willing, with everything going on there. But that makes me happy when people do that and go to those off the beaten path places.
I love how you include food and culture as well, because a lot of people, us wine nerds, wine geeks, get really obsessed with only what's in the glass, but we tend to forget that, especially in Europe, food is such an important part of the wine experience.
It's part, they treat wine like food.
Yep.
And that's the thing that drives me crazy when I was trying to sell wine here. We treat wine like a luxury good, the same way you would a purse or jewelry, or they treat it like, something that needs to be very, very heavily controlled, like pharmaceuticals. It drives me crazy because you go to Europe and it's not only treated like a food, and it's subsidized by the government, and they assist in the promotion of it, and they assist the winemakers because they see them as farmers. And it's a completely different mentality. And it's something that is really, really hard to wrap your brain around when you come back to the US and you go to every wine restaurant and every wine is $60 or more. Like that's not what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it's really our philosophy and the way our government kind of treat wines that unfortunately makes that happen. And it's really unfortunate.
What's the best comment? We talk about negative comments. The best comment that you've ever gotten on the show, something that really stuck with you.
Oh man. All right. What I can tell you is the best comments in a general sentiment is when people tell me that I inspired them to try or do something that they didn't know about or wouldn't have done otherwise. When people, that's number one. That to me is, I've mentioned that's the goal of the show. So when people say that to me, that makes me feel really, really good. I don't care if you end up hating the wine, by the way, but if you tried it anyway, like that's the beauty of the world of wine. It is huge and there's wine for everybody. And so if you just did something out of the comfort zone or just that you didn't know about, that makes me happy. The other thing is that we saw it in a few episodes in particular, the Valle de Guadalupe episode in Mexico, the Lebanon episode. There's some other ones in there where I've moved people emotionally. Like if you go to the comments in the Lebanon episode, we really put our heart into that one, but I didn't know if it would resonate on camera. You never do till you put it out. And there was a lot of people who said, I don't know why I'm crying watching a wine show, but I am sobbing during these credits. And that's really, really special to me, because if you can make that emotional connection as from a filmmaker perspective, that's it. That's the dream.
Well, that's the purpose. That's why people want to make film. I love cinematography. I love tech. I mean, that's the reason why filmmakers want to become filmmakers, to make somebody feel something. Well, a lot of actors get into it too as well. That is an awesome story. I have to say some of my favorite comments too are when people
please.
Sorry,
I'm not being a good counter interview.
No, you've been great. No, this is all about you. I'm just saying I did an episode, a little kind of what you're doing, but it was the only person. I don't have the whole crew, right? It's just me at Avagnanesi and Beyond di Santi in Tuscany. And somebody left a comment. I pinned it on the top talking about how much Avagnanesi meant to him, especially after his wife died. And he actually took her ashes and spread them in the vineyard that I actually shot at. And it was really, really a moving comment. So That's the emotional payoff of why we do this, right?
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's fermented grape juice. But if you can add that extra, if people understand why it's more than that, if you can help them get to that level, that's because it ties. Going back to what we said at the beginning, ties to all your senses, ties to memories. Like when you bring in everything, the sight, the smell, the food, the taste, the sounds, and then it ties it to a specific place and location, and then you can form things that last forever. So form memories that last forever.
So do you think what's more important, as I pour myself something I'll tell you about later, what's more important because you're showcasing both? Is it the actual wine in the glass or is it the experience?
I'd have to say the experience. I feel like that's the answer that is romantic. So like I'm debating if that's too much of a cop out answer because it is important, the wine. Uh it's the wine is the lens which you see the experience through. It kind of all has to line up for you to have what we're talking about. All these emotional experiences
Yeah.
that people are saying, it all has to come into focus. It can't be done with only one of those two elements, right? So I'm an experienced guy, but you don't get to that point without good wine to start. Doesn't have to be transcendent wine, doesn't have to be expensive wine, but it has to be something that is well made and something that you'll pin back to that experience.
So, some of the most memorable experiences in wine in my life were definitely not with the finest wines or the
Yeah.
greatest wines in the world. The people that I mean, for me, the ultimate purpose of wine is to keep those that you love at the dinner table just a little bit longer.
Yeah,
Because
Wes Hagen said that to me too. He said that same
yeah,
sentiment. And that's
great
it.
winemaker too.
Yeah.
Conversations just flow a little bit differently. Have you found when you're doing the show, because you're doing it with the whole crew, when you're with producers, producers are great producers. The ones that you're going to show are farmers. They're producing something. Have you found that they stiffen up on camera? It's taken a couple of takes. Has it been very natural for them?
It's very different with who you have. Uh it's definitely easier when I have somebody who can loosen up. I've part of my job on camera. This is why when everybody, and I'm fine with this illusion that everybody has it. Like we just show up, Vince just walks on set, like Anthony Bourdain gets to hang out. There's no, and then leave. I see my job when I'm in those interviews as facilitating the best conversation from the winemaker, like you're doing now to me. I've done my homework. I have a few things that I know are important to them, but I also have to instantly find out what makes them tick, how comfortable they are, how I can get the best performance out of them. Is it a thing where I need to talk more to Phil because they're uncomfortable, or I need to just let them go? You got a winemaker like Wes Hagen. I say two words, I just let him go.
Yeah.
I have a winemaker, like maybe somebody who's a little more shy, especially if there's a language barrier. I might push and dig harder to kind of pull out the best information from them because they don't really know what translates on camera quite as well. So it really is very varied. Because to answer your question, yeah, they're farmers first. A lot of them are not used to being on camera. It's hard because we've got 4 cameras now for our interviews, and I have to make them forget they exist. I try and get joking with, or like at least talking with them before the cameras are rolling, and we don't do a and action because then they go deer in headlights. Some people,
Yeah.
so I don't even do that. I start talking, and my crew just gives me a little like, we're going. And then I just continue the conversation because if I can get them to forget that the cameras are there, that's my goal.
People don't understand. We were talking about this a little before we started. When you shoot like that, because you want to get as much natural content as possible. So in an interview, when people are talking, it can go on for a long time, anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, maybe even longer. And you have to go through and find the bright parts of those conversations and whittle it down to 15 to 30-second snippets.
Hardest
It's a,
part of my job.
yeah, you
Hardest
talk
part of the
about
job.
people don't understand that in the editing room, the editing process.
Oh, the editing is the longest portion of the process. It is the most time consuming. It's also, like I said, the hardest part is taking the hour that we spoke, and our segment with a winemaker might be 5 to 7 minutes on camera, and that includes voiceover and maps and B-roll and all that. So getting it has to be like, you want to hit emotional cues, but you also want to hit some, hey, we have to get through these wines and people need to learn. So doing that is the hardest part of editing. Adding the B-roll, the color, the sound, those are all just technical things, but the core principle, that and the voiceover are like what gives the episode a heartbeat, the interviews and the voiceovers that I write. So I spend a lot of time on that, and that's where the editing process is really spent.
And that's the art. Like I've taken a few documentary courses and finding out what important information you want to leave out, what can you take out because you're stripping out way more than you're actually using. Like what real information could I use, and then what were their emotional cues where you can see the winemaker was moved in telling a story, telling about the wine. So how you keep that all in? You found that has become more natural for you. It's been more of an art.
I'm better at getting it. It's still a challenge to balance that in the final episode. I have so much that gets left on the cutting room floor. Like I have so many hard decisions. I'll get the episode. It's the last 10%. I'll get it from an hour to 10 minutes, but now I have to get it from 10 minutes to 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And that 10 minutes is all gold, and I have to cut it somewhere, or it's going to be a 2-hour episode and it just won't work. And
how long does it take you to edit an entire episode?
If I just had nothing to do besides edit the episode, which is never the case, we're always simultaneously working on several episodes, producing new episodes, pitching new episodes, marketing, etc. But if I had only to just edit the episode, I could probably do it in about 2 months. It's all I had to do.
That's still pretty quick for that level of production, man. That's good. Let's go to. I know you had a couple wines to taste because I want to hear more of your stories, and I'll share mine too as well. What else do you have there? Is there anything interesting you could?
We kind of already hit it. I should have picked something different because I went with Chinon because I was like, we're going to talk about Loire because I just went there. So I went with a classic, but another wine that on my wine journey, like Chenin, was pretty important. I had never, a lot of times these wines are, very funky, very earth driven, graphite driven. They're all savory. Like the fruit is there, but man, you can get these amazing savory notes that, the bell pepper that can turn to herbal and better examples. That was another way that I had a red wine. When you start off drinking California wines, if you're an American, most likely. And it's so not a California wine. It was important wine in my journey, to explore.
I love Cabernet Franc. I love Cabernet Franc so much. I love the vegetal quality. I find that Chinon is a little easier nowadays because Chinon's the most concentrated out of the appellations. I feel like
they've increased their quality. That stewed bell pepper note is mostly gone in most. But
I like it. I want the bell pepper.
It reminds me of like old school rustic tomato leaf Napa Cab or something like that. Like I'm this exact same way. I hate that they're all trying to get rid of it and make squeaky clean wines. It still can be in like this herbal character, but a lot of them try to avoid it now, and it bums me out.
And drinking out of a Gabriel glass, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Actually, we have some custom Via Cervino ones that we haven't launched for sale yet, but I have them, and I'm going to launch them soon.
They're going to be an exclusive. I like that.
I think they're going to be VIP only too, so you'd have to join because I at least for now I only got about 50 sets of them, and then I'll do a couple runs.
What do you find like when you're out at specific shoots, because the wine glass is so important? Do you let the winemaker know ahead of time, hey, we want to use our best stemware? Is there something you recommend, or just whatever they throw out there?
No, you know what's funny? So I let them.
Oh, it's a good story. I can tell.
Yeah. Well, just a general sense, like there's been times on camera where I bite my tongue because I know we're drinking it out of the wrong glass. There was a restaurant shoot in particular that I can think of where the restaurant, I provided the wrong glassware and we didn't have any other, and we just had to roll with it. And listen, I just have to look at it like, if you're an average consumer, like you may or may not be thinking of glassware, but probably not. It's probably secondary to other things. I just went to Burgundy, and I went down to Macon and was tasting in the Macanay area, and they're drinking out of very small glasses. And same thing in Chablis. Like we think of Burgundy glasses as these big, huge bowl glasses. That's not what they drink out of. And the first time it happened in Chablis, I was like, well, that's weird, but okay. And then I went down to the Macanay and they did the same thing. And I was like, oh, they don't take it as seriously as we do when we study it. And I kind of thought that was cool. I was like, oh, it's not, it doesn't have to be this big, especially in Burgundy, right? Where there's all this intimidation factor, they don't see it that way. In fact, I felt that in other areas when I was there too. They're, more than any region I've been to, only care about the wine. They don't care about tourism. They don't care about marketing. They barely have any hotels. They don't have elaborate tasting rooms. They only care about making good wine. It was really interesting.
Yeah, Burgundy is weird in that regard. Well, it also helps that they can pretty much charge whatever price they want, and people are going to buy the wines. I personally think the hack I give people, if you don't go over to people's places, I bring wine over. Like, I don't have wine glasses. I was like, use coffee mugs. I think ceramic works is fantastic. And people, I know in the Duro before, I was with a couple famous winemakers, and we just drank out these little ceramic like hand mugs. We didn't drink out a nice wine glass, and the wine was fabulous. It didn't matter.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if I can control everything, I want the wine at the perfect temperature in the perfect glass. But I also understand, like, life is for living, and we're not always going to get ideal conditions, and I'm not going to stop a shoot because of it. Or I would chance insulting a winemaker, right? If I told them I don't want to use your glasses. So we go with what they decide.
What are the things that you've learned that you maybe several 5 to 10 tips that you've accumulated by doing all this wine travel that you could share with people for them to apply to make wine a little bit easier on them in their life, or whatever it may be, selecting wine, enjoying wine, just a few helpful tips?
Yeah, for sure. So I've got the wine tips, I suppose, and then I have the travel tips.
That's perfect. Let's hear both of those.
Yeah, I'd say the wine tips. I'm big on drinking on place and just framing your education around that, because what I tell people to start doing when they're starting tasting wine is get the Cabernet based blend from Napa and Bordeaux and side by side. Get the Pinot Noir from Russian River and Burgundy side by side, or wherever you're going to get it. It doesn't. I'm doing France and California, but you can do it wherever. And understand the difference that place makes, because that, to me, there's some people who will argue against terroir and place driven wines. To me, it's the whole game. That's me personally. So I'm big on that. I'm also big on tasting side by side as you start. A lot of people say red wine tastes like red wine. The only way that you understand that it's different is by not tasting one now and tasting one 24 hours later. You open 2 bottles and you have them side by side. And again, like, you can start at polar opposites. Maybe you're starting with a super lean old world Pinot Noir and a super rich Cabernet from a new world location. And those are complete opposites. And then you can go further and try different grapes from the same place, or vice versa. So side-by-side tasting, framing your mentality to learn about wine based off place. Going to off the beaten path regions. This is both travel, but also from a value perspective for wine. Everyone wants to know where value is. I either want the grape that is less made from the place, or I want the place that is less known. If I get Merlot from Napa, it's 30% to 40% cheaper than the Cabernet from Napa by the same producer in the same terroir. So, like, that's where I like to find the value. If there's a wine list at a restaurant, I'm immediately, especially at a restaurant in America where I'm paying 60% markup, I'm going to the other wine section. There's usually, like, they'll do France, they'll do USA, they'll do Germany, and then there's a other section, and it's every other country that has 1 or 2 bottles. That's where I start. I'm not even looking at the other stuff at a restaurant unless somebody else is paying. If I'm paying, I'm going to the other section for value. And those are just fun wines. Those are different wines. The Lebanese wines, for instance, different flavors than you will find everywhere else.
Yeah.
Rose and kirsch and incense and fun flavors that you will not find other places. So that's a big thing for me on finding value wines, is off the beaten path grapes or places. Finding a good wine, in America in particular, a good wine shop, getting out of grocery stores, that is a big habit to break for a lot of people. This audience probably maybe understands that, but I think when you start, including me, including anybody, like, you go to a grocery store, they sell wine. What's wrong with that wine? And in America, what's wrong with that wine is that all those wines that give the illusion of choice are not choice. They are owned by a few conglomerates,
Made by a few
made
big
by a few
people.
winemakers.
I remember when I was learning about wine when I was in graduate school, trying to compare supermarket wines. I'm like, it all kind of tastes the same. Like, what's
Yes.
different?
It's because it's made to be ubiquitous and unoffensive, because it's made so that somebody doesn't buy it and then return it or not like it. They want you to keep coming back to that store. So if you want fun, interesting wines, you have to leave the grocery store. You have to go to at least a large wine shop, but preferably a small one. I go to the large wine shop if I need something specific. I go to the small one for my daily drinkers. That's the goal.
Go ahead,
yeah.
keep going.
Oh, sorry.
You're cooking.
I'm doing
You're cooking. I'm gonna let you cook.
From a wine tip perspective, let's go to a travel perspective. From a travel perspective, my move when I am traveling for leisure, my work trips are very scheduled. People will be like, and I wish I could, but everybody will reach out to me when I'm coming for a work trip and
Oh,
be
you
like,
should do this. You should
do
go there.
this, do this. I'm like, you don't understand. My schedule is scheduled from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day for 6 days. It's just, I can't do it. But when I go for a work trip, I try and leave room for spontaneity. I'm really big on that. Like, if you want to schedule 50% of your trip, leave 50% for spontaneous, because where I get the best experiences are the spontaneous experiences that I wasn't planning on, number one. Number two, I'll ask people in the planned stops where they go, what they recommend. That's where you find the best restaurant. So if I'm going in the wine tasting room, where are you drinking wine as the person who's running this tasting room? Or where are you going to eat? Where's the best spots? Not it might not be the most popular spot on Yelp or TripAdvisor, but I want to know that spot. I actually find I'm a big cocktail bar guy. I did cocktails for a long time behind the bar. So I will usually on my first couple nights go to a cocktail bar and I'll try and talk to the bartender, and I'll get a list like for the week of like, here's the top 5-6 restaurants to hit in this town. And so that's my number one travel tip is leave room for spontaneity, talk to the locals so you can find out where they're going. I'm big on having a car. I know that's a one that allows for that spontaneity. A lot of people travel.
You have to. I know.
Yeah. Even in I mean, if you're in a city, that's one thing. City's one thing. But for instance, when I did that Greek trip, we flew into Athens, and then most people, what they do is they do islands, probably hit the big islands. The best time we had in that Greek trip was when we rented a car and we drove from Athens through the Peloponnese all the way around, and we were in places that aren't the big tourist islands. We're meeting locals. We're seeing the landscape. You're making your own pace. I'm really big on renting a car. It can be intimidating in foreign countries, but I think it's worth the extra hassle and scaries because you get those real experiences.
You end up in small villages. You get great stories.
Yes.
I have we're going to ask a question about what you working as a bartender for a while, but I better share my wine before it. Because have you ever heard of the grape Prokupac before from Serbia?
No, but what's funny is my crew is in Serbia right now. I don't know. I know nothing about Serbian wine, but they're on vacation in Serbia right now.
Well, I know Serbian wine is super. This is one of the original producers of the high quality wine in Serbia after became independent. Prokupac is one of my favorite grapes in the world. Like literally on old bush vines, most of them. Think of an imaginary cross between like the flavors. If you could imagine a cross of Gamay, Syrah, Grenache without the high alcohol, and Pinot Noir. So you get earthy tones. It's spicy. It's got a silky mouthfeel up front, soft tannins, red fruit driven. This 13 and a half. Sometimes this one's 14. Actually, doesn't taste like it. Some Prokupacs, they're 12 and a half alcohol because it was used for darker rosés in the past. Love it.
All right, it's right up my alley. I'm a cool climate, lean style red fruit, spicy reds. Yeah. Cool climate Syrah is like one of my.
Syrah is great for me. Sangiovese. Every wine can go sour cherry on me. I'm all in.
Yeah.
Well, that's like 11.
I love that. All right, I got to find it.
Yes. So let's talk about your time behind the bar and working in restaurants. What is learning and working with people and what they're drinking and what they prefer to drink when it comes to wine? Let's not talk about cocktails. Has that helped you become a better communicator on the show, on camera? Are there certain principles that you learned that carried over, or is there a big difference in between the education styles, being in person versus creating a show?
Yeah, I mean the thing with the show is that I'm talking to people who know wine, and there's a completely different approach when you're talking to customers who have varying levels of wine knowledge.
Yeah.
Interpreting, but here's how it helped me in the show. I saw the pitfalls of what people think they want but are unable to say. And
Got
that
it.
was why I started the show, because we all know as Psalms, when people describe wines as sweet, 99% of the time they aren't asking for a sweet wine. They're asking for a fruity wine, a fruit forward wine. We know that when they describe wines as dry, do you really want a dry wine? Or are you referring to tannins? Because that's another misnomer. You start to learn you learn people's misconceptions on grapes. Chardonnay being the classic. People think they don't like Chardonnay until you give them Chablis, right? So you start to learn. What I did was I took a lot of that knowledge and I brought it to the show. I said, this is where I'm finding big holes in people's understanding. And this is where I'm going to kind of hammer it in so that they can better ask for what they want. That's my main job with the show, in my opinion, is if they can better ask and describe the styles of wines they want after watching it. That's really, really important, because so many people don't know how to do that. My big advice with that, going back to the wine advice, when you go to a wine shop, tell them the place and the grapes you like, not one or the other, because that gives, if you have an intelligent salesperson or you have a som in a restaurant who knows their stuff, if you tell them the place and the grape, you're telling them the flavors you like by telling them the grape, and you're telling them the style of wine by telling them the place. And now they can kind of do their little Rain Man matrix and branch off. And the more importantly, if you can tell them, this is what I like, but I'm totally willing to go off the beaten path with whatever your recommendation is, then you've just opened up your world. They'll give you something similar and fun. Like if I was at a restaurant and I told them I like Cool Climate Shiraz and Gamay and things like that, and they brought me that badass Serbian wine for half the cost as the Northern Rhone Syrah, I would be stoked. And they only can do that if you're willing to say, I don't care what you bring me. Here's what I like. Go to town.
That is a great tip. 100% great tip. Let's I have a few questions as we kind of come down the wire here. We're both in this space, this kind of wide media space. What do you think? You're always trying to innovate, always trying to do different things. What do you think the wine industry has gotten wrong in terms of communicating wine or wine media just in general?
Yeah, it's more I'm going to view it through the American lens, because I think we've already talked about how other countries treat it differently. You grow up with it. You see it as food. You've had it with your parents, growing up. It's been affordable since the beginning, whereas, the big thing we get wrong here is we just make it expensive to try and learn and get into it, not only from education standpoint, but from a cost perspective of buying good wines. It's just more expensive to do. So I hate that it's framed like that in at least what I would say, American culture. So that bothers me. From a wine media perspective, I mean, we hit it again too. I just don't like the one-upping. I have to know more than you, or you're not I have this information that you couldn't possibly understand, kind of thing. And by the way, like, I'm not talking from Psalms to consumers. I mean, we've said it. I still get it from people. And I'm not like, I don't challenge anybody to say I know more than you, but I get it anyway. And so this whole like up and down of we have to be an encyclopedia of knowledge. If you want to go be a master som, like, then yeah, you should know your stuff. But I am so happy to go to a wine region. And my mentality is always, when I go into an interview, you live here, you make wine here, you know more than me. You tell me what I should know about this region. Because sometimes I have misperceptions about a region too. So I hope we can get better in wine media doing that.
One of my good friends who's got a good name for himself in the British scene, but also does consulting now, wrote an article last year saying wine doesn't need more education, it needs more seducers.
Yeah. You need
And
to
I
sell the romance a little bit.
and I thought, man, that is 100%. I mean, it's kind of what you're doing as well. You're showing off how wine can be sexy, or going to a place, how great experience you can have by being involved in the wine world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna, and that's my thing is there's no article, even my hour-long documentary is gonna scratch the surface of a wine region. I can't, so the idea that anybody's gonna come in and teach you everything you need to know is in a post or a video is just unfounded. And that's what drives me crazy when, especially, I love my format of 1 hour video because short form is the worst. I get the most hate on short form because you're trying to condense things into 1 minute, and then the whataboutism, like, what about this? What about this? It's like, yeah, I know. I'm just trying to give you a little piece of information in a minute. I understand that there's exceptions to every rule. So that's why I like what we can do in an hour, but even that's not enough time. If you like it, you got to get into it on your own, read your own books, go to the region, whatever it is.
So what keeps you, this is what we'll end on. What keeps you so excited about wine? Because it's a lot of work to do a show like that. At least right now, it's not going to be a super high margin type of activity until it scales a little bit more. What keeps you excited and going and passionate about wine?
Yeah, the gratitude factor that we mentioned earlier, the fact that I don't have to, I worked for years getting up and doing, working on my feet and being on somebody else's schedule. And so just the fact that I get to work on wine full time, I'm very, very grateful that I get to do what I do. So that's like everything starts there. And then I'm excited for the new places that I haven't been. And the more episodes I do, the more I want to get to them. So, like, I'm really hoping we can do an India episode.
Oh,
Middle class starting to grow, getting into wine. You're seeing more wine planted, consumed. I had never really had too much desire to go to India, just in like a personal vacation. And then people started reaching out to me and they were like, you should come check out what we're doing. And also, how wild is it that, I mean, we have people watching our show from India? I mean, that blows my mind. And then the fact that they want me to come, I'm like, well, I have to come. I have to see what the situation is. And the same thing, it's not so off the beaten path, but the UK is another area that's really, really growing and they're excited about it. And I want to see, okay, what's the UK doing? They're a new region. Brazil, they're hitting me up constantly. They say, come down here. You got to see what we're doing. They have some crazy thing where they can harvest twice a year because of the way the weather is. So those kind of places, as I started like I wanted to hit all the big regions. I want to go to Tuscany. I want to go to Napa. I want to go to Bordeaux. The more I do this, the more off the beaten path I want to go.
I can. That's how my wine career started, with all the off beaten path places. Then I
Yeah.
learned that, for me, was writing at the time. I'm not going to make a living writing about these places because, but that's great. I agree that some of the best stories are when you travel those places. I hope you get to India. It's for me. I spent 42 days in India once.
Oh, so you know it.
Oh, I know. India is the most magical place I've ever been. It's not an easy place to travel.
Wow.
It's pretty intense. So, and some of the wines can be very exciting. Some are quite interesting, some not so much. But I'm sure you'll see how. That's what I want to follow up on. The last thing: has it ever been when you've been on camera? I won't ask you to ask any names or anything like that, where you tasted the wine, you're like, "This isn't very good," but I have to look. I have to perform differently on camera.
Yeah, I'll start by saying every wine is a miracle. Like the fact that we can produce it at scale for the price that
Yeah.
you can consume it. Champagne is the classic example, or anything done in the champagne method, just because how much work is into it. But really, any wine, we're in a golden age of wine. I'm sure you've heard that said before. Everybody in the wine world knows wine has never been at a higher quality and more affordable than any time in history. So that's really cool. So I start with that. That being said, I don't think I have wines that aren't my style often. And as a Somm, going back to that, what did you learn in a restaurant? You learn you're not drinking for you, you're drinking for them. So I have wines that are not for me very often. Doesn't mean they're not for somebody else. If you watch enough of the show, you'll see when I'm more excited about a wine. There's clues you can pick up on. You'll see the way my face lights up when I'm super excited about something. That's more like the exception than the rule. Like if I do 20 wines in an episode, maybe, or 2 of them will be the ones that I'll really be like, that's great. And I can't call it out on the show because I don't think that's fair to the way, the other producers or what have you. But you can pick it up if you start to become a Vino fan, if you will, and watch all the episodes. You'll start to see my mannerisms.
That's the beautiful thing about video. You can't hide. You can't hide.
I can't lie anyway. I'm a bad liar. My face, my wife will tell you I can't lie. So
Vince, I'd love to have you on again. Where people will find you, I'm gonna tag you via for Vino, your YouTube page, and then also your Instagram. Those are probably the 2 best.
Those are the 2 best. Yeah, 2 best platforms. YouTube for all the full episodes, 100% free. If you ever want to watch them without ads, you join Vino VIP. It's very minimal. It's $5, $10, or $20 a month. And you get behind the scenes stuff. You get all the videos without ads. You get other benefits. But I wanted the show to always be free. So it's free on YouTube, always and forever. And Instagram, I'm very active on as well. So those are the 2 main platforms.
All right. Thanks so much. We'll be in touch.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Good talking to you.